And these kids are like 16, 17, 18, and they're not little kids at that stage, and they've been doing kendo since they were little. They're fast and they're strong. So it forced me to change my kendo. It really forced me to think about deeper concepts of kendo. And it's thanks to that, really, that I was able to progress towards sixth dan. It was a good one because not only was I fulfilling this role as a teacher in that respect, but it really forced me to evolve my kendo. Kendo is such a central pillar in my life. It's been part of who I am, and it's given me everything. It's given me my wife, it's given me my children, it's given me my family, it's given me my career now. I couldn't imagine not doing it.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Tokushikai Inside Look podcast. Today we're speaking with Andy Fisher from Blackpool, UK. Andy has been training for over 20 years, during which time he's represented his country in 7 European Championships, 4 World Championships, and has taken first place in both the British Open Individual and Team Championship, as well as gold at the French Open. Andy currently holds the rank of Renshi Rokudan Kendo and is the founder and operator of Kendo Star, a top-tier international kendo equipment supplier, as well as the host of an extremely popular kendo-themed series on YouTube called The Kendo Show. In this conversation, we explore Andy's journey in kendo, the many twists and turns, failures and successes, and hard work that has led him to where he is today. This is an especially important episode that I think everyone should listen to, no matter the discipline, because it shows what it really takes to pursue these arts as one's life calling. Like anything big in life, the highs are extreme, but so are the lows, and the strength, courage, and generosity Andy has shown to kendo and the kendo community cannot be compared. I was on the edge of my seat from the beginning to the end of this interview, so please enjoy this episode of the Inside Look podcast with Andy Fisher.
My name is Andy Fisher. I'm from the UK, specifically a small coastal town on the northwest of England called Blackpool. Not a super famous place unless you're into ballroom dancing, as that's what it's apparently famous for. But yeah, as a kid, pretty normal, straightforward childhood. I was not a sporty type kid at all. I wasn't really doing martial arts until I got into my teens. My parents weren't really up for it. I was a bit of a weedy, weak kid, to be honest. The ginger hair didn't help, but yeah, not much of a sporty kid at all. Physical education, PE, that sort of thing was I was the one faking the notes from my parents saying that I couldn't participate because I had a broken leg or something. But yeah, I was always really fascinated by martial arts. So I guess because I was quite small. I'm not a really tall person anyway, but I was quite a small kid. And I think I'd always been sort of fascinated with martial arts like Bruce Lee and stuff like that. And obviously like the culture of the samurai and stuff. My first exposure to kendo, for example, was in a video game on the Amiga 500 called Budokan, where you could play loads of different martial arts, the sort of old school type game. And I just love that, the whole sort of, martial arts, samurai type aesthetic, everything about it really. Especially, like I say, being from a small town in England, where we don't have much sort of multiculturalism here at all. I was into my 20s before I even left the town and went to like the capital city. So it was all very interesting to me. And then when I got to about 14 years old, I was able to convince my mum to let me start doing kickboxing, which was my first sort of experience of any sort of combat arts or martial arts, if you want to call it. And that led on to doing some Muay Thai boxing. And it was interesting because I was good at that from a point of view of form, but I was rubbish at fighting because I didn't like getting hurt. So yeah, I guess if we want to know about how I came to kendo, it was sort of going on from that.
You mentioned that you weren't into sports, so
No.
just general physical activity, and then you suddenly jump into something where you can get beaten up. How did that happen?
Because it was something that I'd never experienced before. I hadn't really accounted for what would happen when I got beaten up. I just I thought I'd be the one dishing out the beatings, and that wasn't quite how it turned out. But yeah, I think just because I've been really into all of that sort of combat style, I guess, aesthetic in movies and stuff. I was really into Star Wars as a kid as well, but I really did like martial arts films and action movies, stuff like that. And I guess I just fancied myself as someone that could do that. And yeah, I guess that's what led me to trying to convince my parents to let me do it.
From kickboxing to kendo, how did that happen?
So there was an interesting bridge between that. So what happened is when I was about 17, I fell away from kickboxing a bit. I got interested in members of the opposite sex, and I met a girl, and I started seeing a girl for a while, and her family was really big on historical reenactment. So they go away at weekends to historical sites, they dress up as Romans and stuff, and they'd reenact sword fights. And I just thought that was fascinating, not so much from a historical point of view, but from a sword fighting point of view. The idea of being able to meet up at weekends and have sword fights. And I kind of experienced that with my girlfriend and her family at the time. And it was through that I met somebody that had been practicing kendo, and they sort of introduced me to kendo. Although they weren't a practitioner at the time, they gave me a shinai of theirs that they'd broken years ago or something like that. And I was like, oh, wow, I've seen this. I remember this from the computer game from years ago when I was a kid and all that. And I loved stuff like the Akira Kurosawa movies, The Last Samurai stuff, all that sort of thing. It was actually The Last Samurai didn't come out until a bit later, but those sort of movies. I really like those sort of sword fight type movies, and I just thought, if I go and learn kendo, then I'll be like a really good sword fighter. Obviously, not knowing anything about what kendo really was or what it was about, and that's how I sort of went down that path.
Well, you mentioned that you were struggling a bit when you started kickboxing. Did you get to a level of proficiency before you shifted over to kendo?
Well, not really, because I was under 18, so I wasn't able to do any sort of fights. And it wasn't something where it wasn't like I dabbled in a few other martial arts as well, like karate and stuff like that. But I never gained any ranks or anything important,
Okay. So then how did you begin kendo?
How did I begin kendo? Well, so I was participating in one of these reenactment weekends with my girlfriend at the time and her family. And one of the chaps that did that, he'd done kendo years ago. And I think we're around at his house, and he had a shinai like in the corner. I was like, oh, what's that? I remember that from the game Budokan back in the day, and I sort of gave it a bit of a swing and stuff. He's like, oh, you can have it. I was like, wow, really? So I took it home, fascinated by it. I thought, I'd really love to do kendo. And this was like back in the day of dial-up modems. So I logged onto the internet and Googled kendo clubs near me, sort of thing. And just by sheer fluke, there was a new kendo club opening. It wasn't in my town, but it was in the next town. So it's about 45 minutes away on the motorway, about 30 miles away, just opening the following week. And they were recruiting for a new beginner's course. So I think I sent them an email. And if I did, that was probably the first email I'd ever sent in my life. But I remember speaking to them on the phone as well, asking about it and stuff. And yeah, that was it. I kind of signed up for this beginner's course and went along. I just loved it. It just took over me right from the start. I was 19. So in the UK, you can start driving from 17. And I've been driving since I was 17. So I was able to drive. I drove myself there. But also at that time, the girl I was seeing and her family, her dad and her brother, they also were interested in it too. So the four of us started together. So sometimes we'd all go together, or sometimes I'd drive there on my own.
So you said only when you were in your 20s before you moved to any big city. What was that? Like, what was happening in that time in your life?
So I picked up kendo when I was 19, and it really spoke to me. I just loved it. It just took over me. I was 19, so I was sort of, I didn't do so well at college, which is I don't know how the education system works where you are, but we have our secondary school until you're 16. And then you have 17 to 18, you have your college. And then after that, you have a university. But I didn't do so well at the college bit. So I was like sort of floating around, not really doing anything proper in terms of education and stuff like that. And I was working sort of part-time in my dad's company. And I was basically just bumming around, just caring about kendo. I was just using it as an excuse to surf the internet, to go on. Kendo World Forums was a big thing back in the day. So I spent most of my days on that. And yeah, I ended up settling on a career in photography. I went back to the college stage and I did 2 years of college diploma in photography, also while practicing kendo throughout the time, and ended up getting a job straight after that in a photography studio. And then what happened is about 6 months or so after I started kendo, basically there was the World Championships in Glasgow in 2003. So obviously it's in the UK. I'm loving Kendo and everything. And so I went and watched it because it's like the greatest event in the Kendo calendar. And two things really stood out. One was that it was a huge event. The Queen was there. It was massive. And it really changed. I mean, I loved Kendo already, but it kind of really gave me a sort of goal as to what I wanted out of Kendo. I was like, this is what I want. I want a piece of this. And I obviously saw the Japanese team and I saw the British team. And about 2 months earlier, I'd been in my first ever Taikai, my first ever Shiai. And my first match, I lasted like 20 seconds. And the guy that killed me in the first round was playing in that British team. So I was like, oh, wow. It was kind of, that kind of set the tone for me for what I wanted out of my Kendo progression going forward. And obviously I was up in the Northwest in Blackpool. My Kendo club was in Preston. And we had 2 practices a week. My teacher, he was third Dan. And then it was me in a way. I'd got to, and everyone else was just beginners. And I just wanted to get to that stage where I could be on the British team and stuff like that. So I got this job at a photo studio. I was working as hard as I could, but it was really difficult because what happened is about 11 months after starting Kendo. This is while I was still at college. The timeline goes back and forth, but whilst I was still at college, I won a Taikai that was in London, down in London. That was probably my first trip to London. So I was about 20, and it was the UK Kyusha Taikai, and I won it. And it was a pretty crazy experience because nobody knew who I was because I was from this dojo no one had ever heard of. And then I got my Shodhan the next day. And then a couple of months later, there was another Taikai. And at that Taikai, remember, I think it was in the second round or something. I did okay actually in the first round or something. And one of the earlier rounds anyway, I fought against one of the new members of the British team. I had this Encho match with him. It was about 8 or 9 minutes long. I managed to beat him with a kote strike. And I went on to lose, but in the next round. But at that tournament, the coach of the team at that time, Sotaro Honda, he came and asked me to join the British team squad training. Now, he was the first Japanese person I'd ever met, right? That gives you an idea of what kind of background I've come from. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. Now, that was down in London, or down that way, which is the opposite side of the country. It's about 300 miles away from where I was living. And it was once a month, but still, so I started going once a month down there and back. And eventually got to the point where, well, if I really want to get to where I want to be, if I want to be on this British team, if I want to be winning these championships, then I've got to access more regular training with the people that I want to train with. And I guess that means moving down to London. So yeah, I managed to get a job at a photo studio down in London, moved down there and trained down there as much as I could. It was difficult though, because I was working in a photo studio that did like family portraits and stuff. It's a lot of evenings and weekends, which is when Kendo happens. But I managed to juggle it somehow. And that was that really.
So in those early days, you mentioned that you weren't very physically active before, and you were from kind of the boonies where there aren't any really well-known sensei or practitioners. What do you attribute to your early success?
Well, by the time I'd started Kendo, I was a little bit more physically able because I had the background in doing the kickboxing. So although I wasn't a really great fighter, it was something I was passionate about and I had done for several years. So I'd sort of built a bit more physical ability. But I'd say that what I'd attribute to my success was pure and simply obsession. I was completely obsessed with it. I mean, Kendo was the only thing running on my brain. I could practice twice a week, once on a Wednesday, once on a Sunday morning, and then every other waking moment. I mean, I was still living at my mum's house in the very early days, and I'd be out in the backyard with my shinai trying to figure out how to do fumikomi. And I had the All Japan Kendo Federation's instructional videos on VHS. And I just watched them over and over again. I had Kendo's Grueling Challenge, the 8th Dan documentary from National Geographic from years ago, had that as well. I just watched them over and over and over. And one of the other things that I had to do was, because I knew that I was in a club that was a bit out in the sticks, and I knew that I had to do more if I was going to improve. I had this system where what I'd do is I'd take my camcorder, because we didn't have cameras on phones. It was like, I had this camcorder that was old then. It's like this. And I'd take that down to the dojo on a Wednesday night or Sunday morning. I'd set it on a tripod and I'd film my keiko. And then what I'd do is I managed to order the DVD of one of the All Japan Championships from the All Japan Kendo Federation. And I'd come home that evening and I'd hook the camcorder up to the TV using the AV cables. And I'd play it and I'd watch the keiko that I'd just done and I'd compare it to that DVD and I'd try and figure out what I was doing different. I mean, that was my my system really for trying to get better when I didn't have access to high level senseis, you know. I guess it was my first exposure to proper, what they call mitori geiko, which I think is one of the most important aspects of improving at certainly kendo and probably other budo as well. And it's overlooked a lot in the West because in Japan, they do it automatically without realizing, because they go to a shiai every week and they're surrounded by it, but we're not. So I think that was it as well, was that kind of obsession to the point where I'd stay up until the early hours in the morning with an old camcorder, comparing it to a DVD I'd imported from Japan to try and figure out on my own how I could do that. You know, how can I make my kendo look like that guy was what I was trying to do. Yeah, I think that's it.
So you're watching all these videos, like All Japans, these are like the best in the world. And then you moved to London and now you're in the presence of, I guess, some of the top British players. What were your initial impressions? And then you have this goal of getting to the British team. What happened?
Well, I knew a lot of I knew the British players at that point already, because I'd already been going down to the squad trainings once a month. So I did know them already. But yeah, it was a different experience because I was in a dojo now where I was being challenged more by the people that I was practicing with. So yeah, I mean, that was an interesting experience. It helped me a lot. It helped me a lot because I developed a healthy rivalry with certain members of the team. One person in particular who's now one of my best friends. But you know, I moved down there to practice specifically with those people. So yeah, it was a huge change, but definitely in a positive way.
Talk about this journey towards being on the national team and then your first experience representing the country.
Sure. So probably, like I say, I was asked to join the team by Honda Sensei after about a year and a half or so of doing kendo. Started going down to the squad trainings. And that was an experience in itself because I went to this squad training and it was such a different environment to anything I'd experienced. I remember walking into the dressing room, the changing rooms, and there's this kind of cold atmosphere because everyone's there. Like everyone wants a place on the team. So, you know, it wasn't like friendly. It was like, who the hell are you kind of thing. And then the guys that are on the team are like the guys that everyone's looking up to. And I do remember going in and I remember starting the keiko. And I remember there being several things being asked of us in the keiko that I just had no idea what they were. I'd never heard of them. It was like, I remember like, oh, okay, we're going to do kakari geiko. I was like, what's kakari geiko? And it's like a fundamental kendo practice. But in my dojo up in Preston, we hadn't done that. We'd done something else that was similar and we called it something else. And that was a really different experience for me. But I just wanted it so much. More than anything, I wanted that zekken with the flag on it and the badge on my arm that said I was one of the members. And I had nothing else in my mind at all that had to happen. So I just go and hammer it as much as I could. Then we had an end of year shiai, an internal shiai in the squad training. And I managed to come second in that. And even despite being a relatively new face. And then I was able to be invited to go to the European Championships in Switzerland. And that was my first proper experience as a member of the national team. Of course, I didn't massively perform well, but yeah, it was a journey that was tough, to say the least.
When would you say that now that you're practicing on the level of the rest of the national team, when did you say your next big jump in terms of your kendo practice, in terms of your understanding, in terms of your commitment? When was the next major change moment?
So at the time, the best player in the UK was Stuart Gibson, a guy called Stuart Gibson. And he was the guy that was my biggest rival. He's the one that battered me in the first tournament I was in. He was the one that I saw at the World Championships in Glasgow. And he decided to move away to Japan. he moved away to Japan, and also around the same time, in fact, shortly before that, Honda Sensei, the coach of the team at the time, he quit. He quit as the coach, and he moved back to Japan. I shouldn't say he quit. He didn't quit. He got offered a job back in Japan. It's not like he ditched us or something. He got offered a job and he went back to Japan. And whilst all this is going on, whilst I'm living in London, I met a girl, because I was single at the time, and she's now my wife. And she was Kendo practitioner from Japan. She was here on as an exchange student, here to learn, not to learn English, but to get a qualification, like a license in teaching Japanese as a foreign language. And she came to the dojo. I actually thought she was a beginner. Turns out she was a grade above me. And yeah, all this sort of thing all happened at the same time. And starting to talk with my wife was a really big influence for me. That changed a lot about my Kendo practice, because she was like, yeah, you're doing all this stuff wrong and no one's told you. She's done Kendo since she was 6 years old, you see. So it was like stuff, embarrassingly basic stuff as well, like how to tie your bogon properly, stuff like that. And then I guess the biggest thing that changed me and helped me kind of progress was after my wife and I decided to get married, we took my first ever trip to Japan. Now, at this point, I'd been quite successful. Once Stuart Gibson had moved over to Japan, I'd done really well in the UK because I was the next best guy at the time. I'd won a few tournaments. I won the British Championships. I even won the French Championships at the time. And then, so I'm like, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at this Kendo stuff. And then my wife and I went to Japan so I could meet a family and stuff. And then she took me to the Gyokuryuki High School Championships, the biggest Kendo tournament in Japan. You've got about 1,000 teams in it. And you've got, it takes 5 days. 2 days for the girls, 3 for the boys. And I just remember going in this tournament arena and just been blown away by it. Like, I was like, wow, I thought I was good at this Kendo stuff. And then there's more teams in the tournament than there are people doing Kendo in my country. So it was like, right, I realized that I was just such small fry. I was nobody when I thought I was becoming somebody. And I think that was a shock that I'd really needed at that specific point, because I guess I was on track for becoming complacent, and probably, yeah, I don't think I'd have improved in the way that I did if I hadn't done that. I realized really that I was this isn't a really great way of saying it, but being good in the UK doesn't mean what I thought it meant. Yeah. So that was a real big thing for me, to be honest. And I guess that was the biggest thing that changed in me until I actually took the steps to move to Japan in 2009, something like that.
How much time between this first trip and when you moved?
About 3 years, I guess.
Okay. So you're already one of the top players in the UK at the time. You go back, and what were you doing in those 3 years before you decided to move? And then what ultimately motivated you to make that move?
So I got made the captain of the team once Stuart Gibson, I call him Gibbo, but everyone does. But once he moved over to Japan, I got promoted to the captain of the team. So the squad and being on the team became everything in my Kendo experience. And I'd made that trip to Japan. And then it was coming up, we had a couple of European championships. We did pretty well. We came third. Stuart had come back to the championships from Japan. So even though he was living in Japan, he'd still come and join the tournament. So he'd still be on the team. There was me, and we had another couple of lads that were doing really well. We went in a couple of European championships. We did really, really well in them. We came third in them both, I think, in the teams. And we narrowly missed out on getting through to the final, to be honest. And then when it came around to the World Championships in Brazil, which would have been my second one, I was like, right, I'm going into this World Championships as the captain of the team now. Like, this is serious stuff. I really want to make an impression. And I really put a lot of pressure on myself, far too much. It was a mistake in all sorts of ways. I didn't cope with it very well mentally at all. But I was like, I've really got this is my chance to really make my sort of mark or make history in a way. And I just was like, right, I had to just train as much as I could. And then from this point, around this point, we moved out of London up to Manchester for lots of reasons. But I moved to Manchester. I started running a club in Manchester. and there was more clubs around there, and I was getting to train 5 days a week, 6 days a week. And my daughter had just been born as well, so I had a baby, and I was doing everything I could to train as much as I could for this championships in Brazil. It was costing a fortune. I was training as much as I could, driving around the country to train. I was going over, trying to get the other team members if they could as well. We were going over to other tournaments in Europe every weekend almost, so we could get as much experience as we could as well. And yeah, it was all kind of going up towards this. And then what I did is I then took a month off work and I went over to Japan again. I spent a month in Japan training at Fukuoka University's Ohori High School, which is one of the best kendo schools in Japan. Luckily for me, my wife's brother graduated that school, so I had an in. And yeah, I had a month of hell practicing there. I thought I was going to die every day, but managed to survive. And yeah, just tried my hardest to put everything into that single tournament. And it came to the tournament. It was a huge pressure on myself I'd put on myself because I'd spent all this towards it. Huge pressure I'd put on my wife. My wife was pregnant as well at the time, actually, with our second daughter. So a lot of pressure I put on my family as well, obviously, because I wasn't there much, because I was out doing kendo all the time. I'd really prioritized it above everything. And I went out to Brazil with this sort of, I've done everything I can. I'm really going to rock this. And yeah, I totally didn't rock it. I totally messed up the individual matches. Didn't even get out of my pool. I didn't perform great in the teams either. Better than I did in the individuals, but not nearly well enough. We had a tough draw though, to be fair, but still, I didn't do the kendo that I wanted to do. And it hit me really hard that I'd put all of that on the line and nothing had materialized. And I remember sitting on the plane on the way home, and it's a long flight from Brazil. And I remember just thinking like, the only way is to go to Japan. The only way for me to get in, to do what I want, to achieve what I want, is going to be to move to Japan. So I decided that's what I'd do. My wife was in Japan already at the time because, like I say, she was pregnant and she wanted to have a daughter in Japan. So she was already there. And I remember I came home to an empty house and I was like, right, I'm going. And I bought a ticket, canceled my contract to the place I lived, sold all my stuff, quit my job, rang my wife, said I was coming, nearly got a divorce. Was not a responsible course of action. I do not condone it, right? At all. Anyone listening to this, do not do it this way. It's irresponsible. But that's what I did. I turned up to Japan, had I turned up to Japan. The coach at the time was a Japanese sensei called Matsumoto sensei. He was from Kyoto. Now, my wife's from Fukuoka, which is right down south in Japan. Kyoto's in the middle. And he was from Kyoto, and he said, well, look, you've basically been my best student over the years. I'll do what I can to help you out in Japan. So I turned up in Japan, had nothing, had very little money. I didn't have a job, didn't have anything. And I turned up in Japan, and the coach, Matsumoto Sensei, said that he'd give me an introduction to a kendo company where I might be able to get a job. Turned up with my resume, gave him that. They kind of said, don't call us, we'll call you. Got on the Shinkansen down to Fukuoka, arrived. The evening I arrived was November 1st. My daughter was born that evening. Just made it in time. Yeah. And whilst I was down in Fukuoka, I got a call from the company that I'd been to saying that they wanted to talk to me. So I went back to Kyoto, went and spoke to them. They told me they don't really like hiring foreigners. They don't trust foreigners. But Matsumoto Sensei, they owed him a favor. So they give me 3 months. And that was it. That was how I ended up there.
Wow. Okay. So it probably took a while for your wife to kind of understand, like, you're serious, you've moved here, you've sold all your stuff. When did it feel like it was settling down? And when did you feel like, okay, I'm here, I'm doing something, I'm improving my kendo, but now there's more?
The first 6 months was tough. like I say, they gave me they put me on a 3-month trial contract, which I think they expected to terminate after that. They didn't. They paid me well, like below minimum wage. So we couldn't afford to live together, my wife and I and our kids, on what I was earning. So she was staying with her parents. We lived separately for about 6 months. But luckily, I guess, I mean, because I really loved Kendo, the idea of working in a Kendo company was like a dream come true as well. So I worked really hard at it. And I performed really well. We did really well. And I helped the company really boost their sales a lot. They really took to me. They liked having me there. They started to give me a pay rise and stuff. They gave me a longer contract. And I managed to get them to hire my wife as well, because she speaks English too. So that was when we first started living together as a family. And things started to sort of settle down back to some sense of normality. However, I mean, it's not like I was making proper bank. It was like I was still getting paid pretty much on the breadline, and we were getting by, but I couldn't afford a car or something like that. So what I do is for Kendo, I was still very much competing in the national team. I was doing the same as Gibbo was up in Tokyo. We were flying back for tournaments. So I had a bicycle and I'd strap my boga to the back of my bicycle, and 3 times a week I'd cycle to the local dojo that I was a member of. Fantastic dojo. Once a week I'd cycle to the Butokuden, which is the Kyoto Budo Center. And once or twice a week I would also cycle to Kyoto University to practice there. And it was okay. It was okay. But I mean, I thought it was okay. It was tough in the winter with the bicycle. I'm not gonna lie. And it was going okay. But basically, before the Worlds in Italy, I went over to the US on a business trip to the US Championships. And then I met a lot of the people in the US. I knew a few of the US team members already because I'd done Shiai with a few of them. And after that, I went over again and spent a week in the US in California, and I spent a week up in Vancouver. And during that week in Los Angeles, I spent basically a week practicing with the US team. And that was the hardest keiko I'd done since the days of the high school in Japan. That was tough. And that was really great. That was a really pivotal experience for my kendo as well, because I saw the gap between where my team was and where their team was, for example, and not just inability, but in terms of commitment and passion and drive that they wanted, and this is a team that had just come off the back of beating Japan in Taiwan. And not just come on, there'd been a tournament in between, but still, this is the team that achieved that. And I was like, I could see why and how. And then I went back to Kyoto after that, and it was like, well, it's cool living here in Japan and stuff and getting by, but that's what I was doing. I was getting by, and work was going great. I was doing fantastic at work. I was getting promoted. I was leading the team of their international sales department, and it was going great. And then I got talking with a rival company down in Kamamoto, because one of the problems was not just that we didn't have much money, so I couldn't really, have the freedom I wanted. But my wife's from Kyushu, she's from Fukuoka, so we were living quite far away. And this company down in Kumamoto talked to me about possibly working for them. They wanted to set up an international division. They offered me a very attractive package to do so. And Kumamoto is like the Kendo kingdom, is often referred to in Japan. And so I moved down there. I took the job, moved down there, and 3 years in Kumamoto was that I probably improved the most at Kendo in those 3 years than I did anywhere else, just because I had access to such a high level of Kendo practice. It really did improve my understanding of of the type of Kendo I wanted to do. And it gave me the opportunity to actually do it. And then that was further compounded when my eldest daughter, started Kendo as well. And then I got involved in kids Kendo as well. So then I took on a different role again, because I was actually becoming a teacher in a way. So yeah, I guess that was the biggest thing, was that point in Kumamoto where I was practicing again with high school kids or with university kids, and then with police, some police, but I was very much involved in what's called the Jitsugyodan circuit, which is the company workers circuit. So yeah, the company I was working for had a lot of faults, but one of the good things it had its own company kendo team, and it had its own dojo. And it recruited people based on their kendo ability rather than their work qualifications. So lots of things in the company were like sort of running somewhat questionably, but kendo practice was great. So yeah, I guess that was a big thing.
So a lot of people these days are, when they've been in the practice for long enough, they've been working on only their own practice, they start to have this transition of being a teacher and being a senior to others. How did you see your transition in that? Because you were so focused on your own practice and being
definitely
good. Yeah,
definitely. So when I was working at the company in Kamamoto, basically that was, to a large part, that was mainly for my own practice. Though I did have juniors coming up. When I say juniors, I don't mean kids. I mean they were kids from my perspective. They were like 18, 19 or whatever, but who were sort of around second and third dan level. And I was fifth dan at the time. So they sort of looked to me as a bit of a senior teacher type thing as well. But I didn't have like an official teacher role there. It wasn't until probably after I left that job and we moved actually to Fukuoka, which is where I set up Kendo Starts when I first started my own business. And my kids, I put them in the nearest dojo, which was at the school that they went to. So they went to school in the day, and in the evening at that school, they had a dojo. And because I was an adult and I was fifth dan at the time, I was automatically entered into the Shidobu, the teachers division or the section of the club. So from then on, I was officially considered a teacher at the club. I was entrusted to conduct lessons for the kids or practice menus for the kids and stuff like that. That was a big kind of step, and it happened suddenly. It happened it wasn't like a gradual thing. It was like up until then, I was mainly just focusing on myself. And then bam, we went to Fukuoka and it's like, okay, Fisher Sensei, you go and teach those kids this or whatever. Okay, right. And that was a big step. Interesting experience in lots of ways, especially like when we went to a tournament and I was the teacher in charge of the team. I'm the only foreign guy there. And then when people are shocked enough to see a foreigner there, and then when they see you in the suit and you're in charge of the kids, they're like, whoa, you do kendo, sort of thing. That's kind of a very weird experience. But yeah, I think that was the big thing for me. And then what happened there is one of the kids who was a junior high school student, his dad was the teacher at the local high school. And he said to his dad, the first day we went there, the first day we went to the practice at the kids club, I took my boga with me, put it on, stood as motodachi for the kids, but all the kids come out first. And you can see the ones that come out first are the ones that have got the most confidence, the strong kids. But they're just kids, right? And they think, oh, it's just a foreigner. But yeah, I was able to change their opinion, let's put it that way. And then that evening, one of the kids' dads comes to my house, knocks on my door, and he said, oh, this is my kid that you practiced with earlier. This is his older brother. I'm a teacher at the high school just over there. We do practice every day at 5 o'clock. Please come and teach our kids as well. So he actually came and invited me to go and help teach at the high school too. So I was kind of helping out doing that too. That was really cool. So that was a really different dynamic as well, because they weren't little kids then. They were high school kids. So these kids were like 16 to 18 years old. So they've got some power, they've got some ability, but it really changed the way I had to approach Kendo, because I was 35 at the time, probably a bit younger, but yeah. And these kids are like 16, 17, 18, and they're big. They're not little kids at that stage, and they've been doing Kendo since they were little. They're fast and they're strong. So it forced me to change my Kendo. If I tried to do what I'd been doing up to that point, where I was just trying to fight them as peers, they just run rings around me. I can't keep up with them. They're too fast. They're too physically strong. So what I found was it forced me to take on the role of Kendo for Kendo from the point of view as a teacher. And it really forced me to think about deeper concepts of Kendo, things like taking the initiative, the concept of sen. So even though they're faster than me, if I could get them to attack in my timing, I could still hit them with the Vanawaza. And it's thanks to that, really, that I was able to progress towards sixth dan, because that's what sixth dan's all about in Kendo, really. So yeah, it was a huge, huge step, but it was a good one, because not only was I fulfilling this role as a teacher in that respect, but it really forced me to evolve my kendo from just competition style kendo to doing what kendo is really about, at least what I think it's about at the moment.
Wow. What was it about your teaching that you would have a student's father coming to ask you to teach? Did you
Yeah.
approach teaching in a different way than what these other teachers were doing at the time?
Well, no, what it was is that basically, I think what it was, without sounding, I don't, I think I was a lot better than they thought I would be. When I first rocked up with Bambogu, I think they expected me to be like most of the foreigners that they'd seen, which wasn't many, to be fair. But without sounding too, how can I say? I'm not trying to brag or something like that, but I did all right in Japan, like on the competition circuit as well. Like at least at that point with my peers, I could go toe to toe with them. I'm not saying these professional police officers, of course, those guys are in a different league, but regular people like I was on a par with them. And that's something that they hadn't seen before from a non-Japanese person. And I think because I could speak Japanese as well, I could communicate. And I had experiences that most Japanese people who are in my sort of demographic haven't, things like being in the World Championships, living in a different country, stuff like that. I think they probably felt that that was an interesting thing for the kids at the school to experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to transition a little bit from the kendo to the business of kendo equipment. Could you maybe talk about what were you doing in Kyoto and then what were you doing in Kumamoto and then creating your business? Yeah, just
So, like I said, I joined a company, a Budoga company in Kyoto, a famous one. I think anyone that's followed me knows exactly where I'm talking about. And I started there right at the bottom, like I say, less than minimum wage on a purely temporary contract. They said to me, right, we were going to, I think the first thing they said to me was, we couldn't decide whether to have you just like deal with customer service in English, or we want to see what you can do and make your own website and see how you get on with that. Now, at that point, I had no experience of coding or websites and stuff. I wasn't a particularly computer genius at the time. And they were like, no, we want you to build a website. You've got to build a website. You've got 3 months to do it. And by the end of the third month, it has to have made $5,000. That's what they said. Or you're fired, basically. Okay. So that was an experience. I worked day and night on that, obviously, because I had to learn so much whilst I was doing it. I had to read up on stuff. I had to learn about shop and cart providers, all this sort of stuff, SSL certificates, all this sort of stuff I hadn't done. The one thing I did have, though, was that I was able to take good photographs. So I was able to do the product photos pretty well, banners, advertising, stuff like that. So yeah, I from moving to Japan, I worked in the Bogu industry, the Kendogu industry. And that particular company was all sorts of Budo. It wasn't just Kendo. Kendo was my specialism, but they sold stuff for EI and for Aikido and other stuff as well, Kyudo, all sorts of things. But Kendo was my specialism. And to be honest, it wasn't really their specialism. They didn't really have many Kendo practitioners working there. It wasn't the main source of income for their company. But that's something that I helped them change at the time. And then, I moved to Kumamoto. Again, it was a Japanese company. It was a company that sort of came out of nowhere in Japan. They became very, very big, very, very quickly. And they were looking for someone to open an international department or, division. And that's how I got talking with them. And I went down there and started everything from scratch. So that was a new experience again, because instead of going into an infrastructure that was already in place, I was starting something from zero. So we did that. We built that up. We had to put that whole infrastructure in place. It's not just building a website. It's dealing with products, product stock, order fulfillment, all that sort of thing. We built it up. We had a small team of about 8 or 9 people at one point doing it. And I oversaw that, and it became very successful. Actually, it was very successful at one point. And then the problem with it is that at the end of the day, I was still working for a Japanese company. And although we did very, very well on the international side of it, we were still somewhat dwarfed by the domestic market. Because at the end of the day, Kendo is practiced by far more Japanese people than it is elsewhere, people from elsewhere. So from them, their priority was always the Japanese customers. And it was starting to pull me in different directions, because my goal with the job I was doing was to provide equipment that was suitable for my customers. And we have different needs outside of Japan than people in Japan. We don't have Shiai every week. We don't only care about winning shiai. Most Japanese practitioners are high school age or younger. They don't hit each other that hard. Little kids don't hit each other that hard. Whereas in, outside of Japan, it's very, very different. And I know that because I've been through it. I started Kendo when I was 19 years old. I remember what it was like to be a beginner and to have a beginner hit me for the first time and know what that feels like. And it was becoming very difficult because there was a lot of internal clashes going on with what I wanted and what the company wanted. And I didn't fit in well. And this is the same at the company in Kyoto as well with the domestic staff. I didn't get on well with them. Probably worse in Kyoto because I was kind of just a nobody in the company. But when I went to the Kamamoto company, there was the president of the company, and then there's two not vice presidents, but what called bucho in Japanese. And I was one of those. So I was like everybody's boss. And I don't think many people really, really cool with that. And it's not like because I'm a foreigner, but it was because I'm a foreigner, I do things very differently and I break a lot of the Japanese rules. Yeah, that didn't make me popular, but that wasn't my priority. I wasn't there to be popular. I was there to make my customers happy with the service we're providing. So there was that going on as well. And then it was and then I started to get the feeling that maybe the company itself in Kamamoto was it was expanding, but a little bit too rapidly in sort of random directions. And I wasn't really on board with it either. I wasn't sure it had a really safe future. And I thought to myself, I don't really see myself doing this for the rest of my life in this format. It's not allowing me to properly do what I want to do in this industry for the international Kendo community. Because at the end of the day, I want more people to practice Kendo so they can get from it what I've got from it. And I think I can help them do that through access to good quality protective equipment that's easy to get hold of. Because it wasn't easy for me to get hold of when I first got mine. And I didn't know anything about what I was buying. And I don't want people to be in that position. And I felt like I was being handicapped in a way by being tied to this company. So I left and decided to start up on my own. When I first started up Kendo Star, I actually worked together with the company that I'd worked for in Kamamoto. They acted as a supplier for me in the beginning, but it didn't work out too well because I think, in all honesty, I think they thought that I had no other options than to work with them. And what they do is they were my supplier. They'd sell something to me at X amount, and then they'd sell it on their own website for the same price. So I wasn't able, you know what I mean? I wasn't able to sell that then because it's not a competitive price. So they were kind of deliberately pricing me out. I think in a way it was kind of to teach me a lesson a bit for leaving, but whatever. As it happened, it wasn't a problem for me because I was already in touch with another person. There's a company in Saga, Mikatsuki Budogu, who a really good friend of mine runs. And we spoke about it and we decided to sort of work together. He's my business partner in Kendo Star. He operates things in the side of Japan and I operate things over here internationally, as it were. And that's how we got to where we are, really. I mean, in the beginning, it was all operated out of Japan. And then when I first decided to move back to the UK, because I thought that basing Kendo Star in Europe would probably be a better option for us to operate internationally. And it has been for the most part, by far it has. And one of the things that we did first was we were kind of drop shipping. So we'd operate the business and the logistics of stuff on our side, customer service, stuff like that. And my business partner in Mikatsuki in Saga would ship everything direct to everybody. But it got too big for him to handle that, as well as running his own Japanese side of the business, even though he took on extra staff to do it. So we changed the whole business model. Everything comes to the UK now and everything goes out of the UK for the most part anyway. And that's how we got to where we are.
Wow. So you were talking about both the quality, because there's a different demographic of practitioners outside of Japan
Yes.
than there is inside. And then you talked about the ease of access, so the service.
Yes.
When you started Kendo Star, what were the main things you wanted to change about foreigners' experience in terms of purchasing?
Yeah, no problem. So the thing is, because I was able to become quite high up in the company in Kamamoto, I had access to a lot of information and a lot of, I was able to learn everything. I knew everything about the industry and I know everybody in the industry. And because for me, it was never just like when I worked in this industry, it was never just a job. I consider myself a professional at what I do. And to be a professional at something, you have to know the answer to every question. And that's the position I got myself into. So when I talk about the quality of the bogu, I know what I'm talking about. I've got confidence in my ability to recognize the quality of kendo equipment. I know the difference between the good quality and the not good quality, because I've been there, I've seen it, I've been to the workshops, I've spoken with the craftsmen. I know what I'm talking about. I've got confidence in that. So when I started Kendo Star, the fact is when I started Kendo in the first place, of course I didn't know anything about Kendo Bogu. And it's the biggest misconception I think that still exists, is that by becoming good at Kendo, you automatically become knowledgeable about Kendo equipment. And it's just not true. You know, when I was working in these companies in Japan, I would give advice to 8th dan senseis about what Bogu they should choose, because they come and ask me for my advice, because that's where I specialize. Now, if I wanted to learn about techniques or waza, I'd ask them. But when we're talking about the equipment, well, that was my kingdom. So I knew what I was doing. So I wanted to take that, and I didn't want, you know, people who were in the position I was in when I first started to have the experience I did, where it was like, well, I've got this amount of money, so I'll just buy what I can with that. I wanted people to know that what they were getting was the right choice, and what they were, you know, why they should choose this particular product instead of that one, or they should choose this one instead of that one. And I think there's two things with it. And the thing is in terms of the quality of the equipment and the design of the equipment, the philosophy behind it all is about it being comfortable, about it being protective and being durable. All right. And of course, it can't be heavy and cumbersome and stuff like that. And it doesn't need to be these days, because materials aren't like that anymore. But in Japan, it was going away from that direction. Everyone wants the bogu that's going to be the lightest possible bogu that they can use in the tournaments. So it was getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. And the protective area is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, so that it can feel really lightweight. And you wear it, oh, it doesn't feel like I'm wearing anything. And it's, yeah, you're basically not, was the kind of point that it got to. And it got to the point in Japan where the All Japan Kendo Federation turned around and started putting rules in place and said, hey, you can't have bogu that's like this. And I just felt that the customer base in Japan was different to outside of Japan, because I think as a teacher of Kendo outside of Japan, and as someone that started Kendo outside of Japan, I think it's not uncommon for people to quit Kendo after they first start wearing bogu, start wearing armor, because they don't realize how much it hurts. And especially if they're using something they've borrowed, or they've bought a low quality set that doesn't protect them properly, then of course it's going to hurt and be painful. So I also wanted to design equipment that was going to be protective, so that people could enjoy Kendo without the fear of being hurt. And it's not about injury so much, because injuries are pretty rare in Kendo, especially injuries that are related to being hit. But it's not pleasant. Nobody likes things that hurt. So, you know, I want people to enjoy Kendo and benefit from it, and not feel like, oh, I've got to practice kote with this guy kind of thing. I don't want that to happen. And then the second thing is, and this was really important to me as well with Kendo Star, is the YouTube channel I run, the Kendo Show. It's been a massive hit since I started it. And like I said to you about when I first started Kendo, I had these VHS tapes and DVDs I'd bought from Japan, and then I was filming on my camera. You know, I didn't have YouTube. It was like, I don't even think it was a thing. And I just think that having resources out there in English and easy to understand, I think that can benefit the international community. I really do think that. But of course, it's a big job to do that sort of thing. And Kendo's not big enough for me to just do that as a YouTuber. Yeah, it just isn't. As much as the idea of that sounds quite nice, it certainly sounds like less stress. So Kendo Star plays a very important role in being the foundations of that platform being able to exist. Because, you know, the amount I'll be honest with you, right? When I quit my job at the place in Kamamoto and I was starting up Kendo Star, I was really thinking to myself, is this really a good idea? Why don't I just start doing something else? Why don't I just, you know, because it's not easy. It's not an easy job. It is stressful. I know that sounds rich as well. Like, it's, oh yeah, what are you talking about? It's a Kendo job, you know, but it's not all fun and games. But it wasn't until I started getting emails of people, because I announced that I was leaving the company, and I started getting emails of people saying, what are you doing next? What are you doing next? Are you going to keep making the videos? Because I started Kendo after seeing your videos. I started Kendo after seeing your videos. I started Kendo after seeing your videos. I got lots of these emails. I still get them now. You know, I started Kendo after seeing your video, you know. And I thought to myself, well, I can't stop doing that, because that's what I set out to do in the first place, is to help Kendo become more popular with people so that they can benefit from it like I have. I mean, it's obviously working because these people are coming to me saying, well, I found Kendo thanks to the video you put out. So the YouTube channel is a really important thing to me. And like I say, it's really underpinned by Kendo Star because that's what allows it to exist. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I went to your channel and watched several videos, and I can imagine the amount of work it takes to even generate one of those and to go on. Could you share a little bit about that? Like, what do you have to do to create this, and what are your plans for it? Yeah.
So there's a few different types of videos that we have on the show, of course, but like, obviously the most popular ones are the instructional type ones that I do, where I demonstrate types of techniques or something like that. And I know they're the most requested ones, and I'd love to put out loads more of those, but they're of course the ones that take the biggest effort in order to produce, because I have to hire a place, a hall, a dojo. I have to take proper lighting. I have to get a camera set up and stuff like that. I have to organize a time to do that for a start. And then I have to film all the footage. It all has to be edited. All the sound has to be matched up. It takes a lot of effort to make one of those. And it's worth it. It's definitely worth it because they do seem to be the most popular ones. And I came up with this idea about a year and a half ago for a series called Zero to Shodhan. So the idea was that it would be a series of instructional videos that would take you from starting at Kendo and give you everything you need to understand to pass Shodhan. Now, Shodhan's not like some massive high grade in Kendo. It's the first proper grade. And I'm not even saying that you'd necessarily be able to pass it just by watching those videos. Maybe you would. It depends how obsessed you are. But they're supposed to be kind of like like if you're at school or something, there's a textbook to help you with your study. There's supposed to be a video version of that. And they've been really popular. But again, they've been really difficult to make because obviously there's all the planning as well, right? Well, what does it take to get Shodhan? Okay, well, they need to know all this. And then what can go in one episode and what can go in this episode, and what are we going to talk about? What have we got to miss? What mistakes have we got to show? And all that sort of thing. The whole, I wouldn't say script, because I've tried making videos with scripts. I'm not very good at it. I don't like doing it. So I tend to just, if you watch the Zero to Shodhan series, I think there's 7 or 8 episodes. About halfway through, the theme of it totally changes because I go away from this sort of voiceover script style to just putting a camera in front of me and teaching like I would teach a class. And I think that's actually been better received. And then there's other types of videos that I do as well. Like I do a weekly show called Kendo Rant. It's called Kendo Rant because I originally started the series, of me picking a topic and then ranting about it and then answering questions from people. And now it's kind of evolved into this Kendo Q&A in a way. I should probably change the name of it, but I don't know. It's kind of become a thing. So yeah, I take weekly questions from people where I answer them on video, just much like this, where I'm just sat in front of my computer doing it. And then I try and do video analyses as well, where we'll take a Shiai or something, sometimes a famous match, and I'll talk people through it and talk about, oh, look how they set up this technique or something like that. Or I'll do translation videos where somebody's been to a seminar or something in Japan and filmed it, and there's a famous teacher teaching, obviously in Japanese, and I'll translate what they're saying. And that's basically the sort of things I do. And I keep trying to do different things when I can get to it as well, of course. But it's, at the same time as running Kendo Star, it takes a lot, it takes a lot. And I'd like to put more out. I would. And I am working in that direction. But yeah, it's difficult. And it's even more difficult at the minute, obviously, because things are all weird in the world with lockdowns and stuff like that. So it's not easy for me to hire venues at the minute either to go out and film videos. But I wanted to go out to Japan. I've got loads of stuff planned where I'm going to go to Japan and I'm going to do interviews with people, and we're going to go and see different things in Japan and look at Kendo in Japan and stuff like that. And then that was supposed to happen in April. So that's another thing that kind of went that way,
I would have looked really forward to something like that, to be able to see it from this perspective. And I just went through slightly some of your videos and I've seen them improve over time. Like, you're getting better at capturing what's interesting. And I really want to appreciate you for sharing everything so far, because when we watch one of those videos, like, Andy is so upbeat and going, it's like everything is easy, but you put so much work, you've gone down to like just barely making it by, all for this one pursuit. and now achieve some level of success. I think people need to just understand how much work has gone and how much effort you've put in.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of them though. I mean, for me, I remember the second time I went to Japan when I spent the month there practicing at high school, I remember having a bit of an argument with my mother-in-law. And it was because she said that Kendo was a hobby. And I was like, Kendo's not a hobby. Like, I can't see Kendo as a hobby. And it still doesn't, for most people it is. And she's right. She was right in what she was saying. It's just for me, it wasn't that. Like, and I don't know, Kendo is something that for me has been, I mean, it's just been such a central pillar in my life. It's been part of who I am. It's a key aspect of my actual identity rather than something that I even do. So it's been really tough, obviously, with like the pandemic and stuff, where I had to basically not practice it properly for like 6 months. And then we got a little bit of practice back, and then we probably lost it again for another month or so now. But that's out of my control. But I mean, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just part of what I do. And it's just been such a important thing in my life. And it's given me everything. It's given me my wife. It's given me my children. It's given me my family. It's given me my career now. It's given me my business. It's, you know, and it's been tough. And there's been lots of times when I've thought, why am I doing this? Why do I do this to myself? And it's not like this is the other thing that's hard to understand. And I don't know how to square this circle myself, but it's not that I like Kendo. I don't like it. I just do it. It's like, I don't particularly like breathing, but I do it because if I don't, something bad happens. And that's how Kendo is for me. It's like, I don't even go there and think, oh, I really enjoyed that. Like sometimes I really hate it. Sometimes I really hate it, but like I couldn't imagine not doing it. It's not that kind of thing. And I don't know. I know that doesn't make any logical sense. I know that's crazy in a way, but I can't. And especially recently, and now I don't have the pressure of things like international tournaments and stuff like that. That's been a bit of a difficult thing for me because I've lost that goal in a way where now I've retired from the team and I'm acting in the position of an assistant coach, but you know, I don't have that kind of goal in sight. And that's been a difficult thing for me to deal with, but I don't know. I just can't ever see, you know, I can't see myself ever quitting Kendo. And even though I've asked myself sometimes, why do I do this to myself? Why do I put myself through this difficult practice? Why do I do this? I can't be bothered doing this today. But I can't not, you know?
No one does anything special by fitting into the crowd. And
yeah,
I think society is changing. I think that for one thing, there was a point in time where not going to higher education and starting your own business was considered low, but now entrepreneurship is the big thing. People admire people that are able to take that risk and go at it themselves. And I'm sure that in the Budo world, it's starting to change too. Like your show, Kendo Show, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from this podcast that society is changing. We need people that are so dedicated to the arts that they make it their lives, because that's what pulls everyone else up. And
I think so.
I used to have that old feeling. Like I was looking down at people that made it their life, were professional in that realm, were just like crazy about it, not treating it as a hobby. But I needed that. Like that was what I needed. I hope you keep up the great work. Thank you.
No.
So that was a great way to wrap up this conversation. I hope we can have many more in the future.
No problem.
Have the great rest of your day.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, mate. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode because we have a lot more exciting conversations to share as we explore the world of the traditional Japanese martial arts. The Inside Look podcast is available on most common podcasting platforms and on YouTube. Remember to subscribe to not miss out on new interviews as they are posted. We're always looking for feedback to improve, so please write us a review or drop us a line at podcast@tokushikai.ca or on Facebook and Instagram at tokushikai.canada. Until next time, thanks for listening.